Welcome to the Enchanted Empath podcast, where we explore the mystical and magical within you. I'm Charlene, your guide on this journey of intuition, energy, and spiritual empowerment. Whether you're here to strengthen your empathic abilities, deepen your connection with the universe, or simply find a little peace and clarity, you're in the right place. Let's dive in and discover the magic that awaits you. In today's episode, we'll explore the war on intuition, empathy, and inner authority. Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I want to talk about something that has been sitting very heavily on my heart for a very long time now. It's something that I've been thinking about, noticing, and quietly wrestling with for years. And that is the way truth, empathy, and inner authority are being slowly eroded. I wouldn't even say slowly, I would say quickly eroded in our culture. And that's precisely why I do the work that I do today. More and more, it feels like we're living in a moment that George Orwell warned us about decades ago. When Orwell wrote 1984, he wasn't just imagining a future filled with cameras and authoritarian governments. He was really describing something much more subtle and much more insidious. He was describing a world where people are actually trained to doubt their own senses, to distrust their own emotions and ignore their own moral instincts, and forget about intuition. In his world, truth becomes flexible, compassion becomes suspicious, independent thought becomes obsolete and risky, and obedience more than integrity is what gets rewarded. And when I look around today, I can't help but think about how closely that mirrors what we're living through now in the United States. In 1984, the party's greatest power was not surveillance or censorship. It was psychological conditioning. People were slowly taught to suppress what they felt and what they saw with their own eyes. Sound familiar? To dismiss what they knew to be true, and to accept contradictions without questioning them. And over time, they stopped asking whether something was true and instead began asking whether it was approved or not. And what's unsettling is that this dynamic is no longer confined to fiction. We are watching this unfold in real time. Before I ever stepped into spiritual work, before I ever taught intuition or energetic awareness, I was a high school English teacher. Literature was my first spiritual classroom, even though I didn't think of it that way at the time. So books like 1984 weren't just part of a curriculum for me, and thank God they weren't banned back then. They lived in my psyche. I watched teenagers wrestle with Orwell's ideas about power, truth, and manipulation. I watched them begin to recognize those patterns in the world around them. And even then, it was clear to me that this story wasn't primarily about politics. It was about consciousness. It was about what happens when human beings lose trust in their own inner voice. And looking back now, I can see how deeply that work shaped me. Teaching literature became my first doorway into teaching discernment. It taught me how to help people think for themselves, how to feel for themselves, and to trust themselves, with an emphasis on trusting their intuitions, or what I call the voice of truth. My spiritual work didn't replace that path, it grew directly out of it. And the same questions remain at the center of everything I do today. How do we stay awake? How do we stay human? How do we preserve our kindness? How do we protect our inner truth in a world that constantly pressures us to abandon it? Because right now, we live in a culture that increasingly rewards conformity over conscience and reaction over reflection. Short-term videos, algorithm-driven platforms, and outrage-based media train us to crave stimulation rather than depth. Our attention spans are shrinking, nuance is disappearing, and complex ideas are flattened into headlines and memes. We are being trained to react emotionally while thinking less critically. In fact, while hardly thinking at all. We are being dumbed down. And at the same time, our education system is struggling under political pressure, chronic underfunding, and systems that prioritize standardized testing over genuine inquiry. Many students graduate without learning how to question narratives, how to evaluate evidence, or empathize across differences. But sadly, they have mastered mass shooter drills. And in that vacuum, political tribalism takes root. Instead of asking whether something is right, people ask whether it aligns with their side. Loyalty becomes more important than integrity. Discernment becomes dangerous, and thoughtful conversations become rare. Perhaps even more disturbing is the growing rhetoric that frames empathy as weakness. That one really gets me. We hear compassion described as softness, and care for the vulnerable portrayed as naive. And this often comes from people who claim moral or spiritual authority. In fact, that's the only place it comes from, which is deeply confusing. Because if we look honestly at the teachings of Christ, his life was built on radical compassion, on standing with the poor, the sick, the stranger, and the marginalized. So to reject empathy while claiming spiritual authority is not a strength. It is moral confusion and outright gaslighting. And these patterns are not abstract. They show up in our headlines and in our communities every day. Families are separated. Children are being detained straight out of preschool. Citizens are killed with zero accountability. And again, these events are framed as necessary, procedural, or justified. And over time, repeated exposure dulls our sense of outrage. What once would have shocked our conscience becomes another story we scroll past. We don't even notice that we're being conditioned, like the proverbial frog in boiling water. And this is exactly the psychological terrain Orwell warned us about. In 1984, citizens were trained not just to obey, but to stop trusting their emotional responses. They were taught to feel what they were told to feel and ignore what their conscience whispered. When people lose confidence in their own inner moral compass, they become dependent on external authority for meaning and truth. And throughout history, nearly every wisdom tradition has warned us against this. From the Buddha to Socrates to Jefferson, the message is the same. Question everything. Not for the sake of rebellion, but for the sake of personal responsibility. It means refusing to outsource your conscience. It means asking who benefits from this narrative, who is being erased, what are we being encouraged not to notice, Epstein files, and whether something aligns with our values or merely our fears. Independent thought is inconvenient to systems built on control, and that is why it is always targeted first. Thank you for being part of my podcast community. I'm offering podcast listeners an exclusive discount on my intuitive tarot readings, 25% off your first session. Visit charlenemurphy.com/tarot offer, one word. That's charlenemurphy.com/tarot offer to claim your discount. I can't wait to connect with you. And this war on intuition does not stop at politics. It permeates our culture. Scroll through social media and you will see endless rows of filtered faces and manufactured perfection. Individuality is replaced with templates. Uniqueness is edited out. Individuality is a thing of the past. We are trained to distrust our natural bodies, our rhythms, our instincts, our inner knowing in favor of external validation and approval. And when people no longer know who they are, they become easier to manipulate. The truth is, the United States is not well. A nation where empathy is mocked, education is weakened, truth is partisan, and fear dominates public life is a nation in spiritual crisis. Many people sense this. They feel that no one is coming to save us. And that realization can feel frightening, but it is also very liberating. Because there is no hero riding in on a white horse, no perfect leader, no institution that will suddenly fix everything. It never existed. If we wait for rescue, we will wait forever. The responsibility and the power still rest with us. We still choose what we consume. We still choose what we believe. We still choose what we tolerate and what we build. Systems thrive when people feel powerless and defeated, and that sense of helplessness is not accidental. It is the goal. Resistance doesn't always look like a protest. Sometimes it looks like clarity. It looks like choosing depth over distraction, integrity over approval, and alignment over autopilot. It looks like getting honest with ourselves about what fuels us, what drains us, and what we are ready to leave behind. This is not spiritual bypassing. It is spiritual responsibility. We can't control every system, but we can control our relationship to them. We can decide not to become numb, not to become cruel, and not to become small. That is why intuitive and intentional living matters more now than ever before. And manifestation is not about pretending that everything is fine with sunshine and rainbows. It is about refusing to surrender your creative power to chaos. It is about consciously designing your life instead of letting fear write it for you. Survival is not the same as living. I know this firsthand. You are here to grow, to evolve, and contribute something meaningful, and that requires intention. It requires attention. In a culture built on control and conformity, creating an intentional life is one of the highest forms of rebellion. And the harder truth is, if you do not intentionally shape your life, someone else will do it for you. Corporations, algorithms, political narratives, and fear-based messaging are already trying, and they have been for decades. The noise is just getting cranked up. This work is no longer a luxury. It is a form of self-defense. Orwell did not write 1984 to scare us into silence. He wrote it to remind us that tyranny succeeds when people abandon their inner authority. Empathy is not weakness. Intuition is not naive. Independent thought is not dangerous. They are our last lines of defense. So, take back your power. Intend, manifest, create, design a life that aligns with your truth. And for me, that meant moving out of the United States, the best decision I've ever made. The future is not written yet, and you are still one of its authors. Remember your inner brilliance and stay awake. Thank you for joining me today on the Enchanted Empath podcast. I hope you discovered something magical to carry with you as you move through your day. Remember, your intuition is your superpower. Trust it, nurture it, and let it guide you. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to leave a review or share how my podcast has helped you on your journey. Until next time, stay connected to your inner light and keep shining brightly. You are magic. I'll see you soon.